All right, all right, all right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy podcast, where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian and anarcho-capitalist perspective. Tonight, we are going way back into Elizabeth Warren's lineage and talking about a movie from the colonial period in America, The Last of the Mohicans, and we have a special guest, Mike C. He will be back. He will be back and joining us once we get into the last night's portion of the show. This is episode 171 of the show, and we have survived the coronavirus one more week. Robert is here with me. He's having technical difficulties with the internet, but hopefully he'll be able to contribute a very, very stunning and brave contribution to this show tonight as we talk about this Michael Mann flick. How you doing, Robert? How are things?
What's up, everybody? Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for having me back on the television show. I am excited to be here. I am very reclined. This is the first time I've done a show in a reclined state, and I'm excited about it. I don't know how it's going to be different for you, but for me, it will be molto bene.
All right, that sounds good enough to me. And you've got an early start tomorrow with the business. You guys have kicked off a return for your main person from Thailand. They're back, and you guys are serving up the goods again. So things are going well. So we will get right to this on the Last Night Sports Show. Introduce our guest, Mike C, and we'll have a pseudo-libertarian, slight hint of fascist conversation. Should be a lot of fun. Hey everyone, it's Daniel Elwood and Robert Johnson, the Last Nighters. And Last Nighters can be found on Launchpad Media, where they're always launching new ideas in your direction. Check it out at thelaunchpadmedia.com. You can also check out this show and show notes and everything else at lastnighters.com/114. This is the 114th episode of the show. We just did Contagion, and the week before that, we did Batman. So we're making the we're closing the loop here. We're going from bats to Contagion to smallpox blankets. We're going to be talking about The Last of the Mohicans tonight with Mike C. We will show him on screen. There, Star Trek action right there. How you doing, Mike? Welcome back to the show. You do music under the handle Mechanical Dream Revolution. It's very, very trance-like, very lengthy, has a lot of clips from movies and television shows, news, sick beats, nice drops. And we were talking in the pre-show, which is available for our Patreon supporters at lastnighters.com/Patreon. We talked for an hour, and we touched very heavily on your music and what the what did I call it? I called it some sort of a long form meme to get it into the subconscious. So welcome to the show. We will have a link to that on our show notes page, of course. But introduce, describe, speak amongst yourself.
What it is. My name is Mike. I make music, and I'm 2/3 libertarian. And I've known you guys for a while now, a couple years anyway.
Yeah, it's been a few good years.
I found you guys because I was looking for literally a libertarian or anarchist analysis of film, and I put that into the internet machine, and it gave me a few options, and you guys rose to the top. So
sick.
Yeah.
That is, we never heard this before. This is great.
No, I was like, I need an anarchist podcast, and I call myself an anarchist more than a libertarian, I think, but pragmatic. I think I've I think I've
A little more
told you guys I'm a
prag,
little more pragmatic.
Yeah, more of a prag.
Well, I'll tell you what. When we came up with one of the names for our show, we were like, "Hey, we might get more like search traffic this way," and apparently it worked. We got a Canadian to find us and befriend us. So this is this is great. So Mechanical Dream Revolution, people will find that. Also, previous appearances: Scrooged, Collateral. Gosh, you've been on like 6 times now.
Lots of stuff.
Night of the Living
Way too many
Dead,
to remember.
Scrooge, Collateral. Yeah. It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life. Starship Troopers. Yeah.
Oh, and then we did the one before that, right?
That was Collateral and Starship
Oh,
Troopers.
okay. Fair enough.
back
Yeah,
to
I
back.
invited myself to Starship Troopers because it's my favorite historical film.
Prehistory.
Historical.
Yeah, it will be. It will be one day.
It's the history of the future.
Did you also do your favorite movie of all time?
Oh, the Warriors. Yeah.
Yeah, we did that too.
Oh
We
yeah,
were
yeah.
like, what are you guys gonna even talk about? And then we talked for like 5 hours or something.
Yeah. And that one plays
Still
heavily-
oversold that movie.
it's good. It's good. And the music for that is very good. And you have pilfered that, I should say.
Yeah, that kind of got me. Yeah, they got me through the end of Boys Will Be Boys, and I'm kind of reapproaching some of those ideas without going back to the well the way like Hack in Hollywood would. I'm being very careful not to try to double dip, but yeah, there's some really good like synthesized slash like rock music in the Warriors that I just love.
Yeah, I won't deny that. In watching the movie for the episode, I had not seen it prior to that, and I was very surprised that the soundtrack was as good as it was. So anyway, we're not here to talk about that. That's the
No, this
past.
movie has a good soundtrack too, though. I've heard techno remixes of this shit.
Okay, send it my way. I'll put them on the show notes page, lastnerd.com/114. But let's get into this,
No,
if we may. We start with the Google description. Last of the Mohicans, The Last of the Mohicans, came out in 1992. So it's actually quite old at this point. It is a 2-hour and 2-minute film by Michael Mann, 7.7 IMDb, 95% Rotten Tomatoes, 3 out of 4 from Roger Ebert, and 90% of Google users liked it. The description is: the last members of a dying Native American tribe, the Mohicans Uncas, his father Chingachgook, and his adopted half-white brother Hawkeye live in peace alongside British colonists. But when the daughters of a British colonel are kidnapped by a traitorous scout, Hawkeye and Uncas must rescue them in the crossfire of a gruesome military conflict of which they wanted no part, between the French and Indian War. Came out September 25th, 1992. Director Michael Mann, as I said. This is adapted from a book and also a film from the 1930s. It won a few Academy Awards. And it has, of course, the talented actor Daniel Day-Lewis, who is the only actor to win 3 Best Actor awards in all of history. 3 Oscars for Best Actor. One was not for this film, though I think he did do a very riveting performance. Robert, let's go with your opening on The Last of the Mohicans, please.
First of all, could you repeat the name of the father?
Chingachgook.
Yeah, that just sounds offensive somehow.
I'm probably butchering it. It's Chingachgook.
Yeah, Chingachgook.
Chingachgook.
Yeah, so we didn't grow up.
So it either sounds Klingon or like some horrific offensive term. Okay, good. Well,
I don't intend to offend, but sometimes.
Well, this movie is definitely a movie of its time. Didn't Michael Mann also do like Heat or something like that, or is this somebody else?
Yes,
No, Michael Mann.
Okay.
And Collateral.
Yeah, so he got better because this film, it very much feels like a film that is taken from a larger work. Characters just kind of move around and we catch back up with them when there's something that the director feels like he needs to show us. I think it's very much a movie of its time. It felt like a Postman or a Waterworld or a Dances with Wolves. There's the terrible fighting, and there's a lot of fighting in this film, and it's all really, really bad. There's been a lot of improvements in that. The acting is all fairly decent and good, but man, I had some issues with the script and just the story in general. The guy who ultimately decides the fate of our hero and heroine is some guy we meet at the very end. We don't even know him in the entire film, and then all of a sudden we just see him at the end, and then it's like, oh, okay. So the hero doesn't even get to decide his own fate. All right. I don't know. We'll probably get into it. I'm sure I'm the one that hated this movie the most. So we'll just have to see where this conversation goes. But overall, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. Last week's was way worse. So who knows? What do you got? What do you got, Michael or Daniel?
Well, I just want to respond to you a little bit. So it's going to get better than 3.5. So that's good. Now, when you're referring to the fate of our hero and heroine are not decided until someone we meet at the very end. Are you talking about the old elder of the Huron tribe? Is this who you are referring to?
That's the guy I'm talking about. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And in the pre-show, Mike and I, while you were having the connectivity problems, we were saying that if we dared try to do this without you, that I would have to assume the hater role of really not liking the film. But I'm glad that you're here, because now I can actually be my normal role of liking the film. So
what? Okay.
Right.
I thought Michael was going to be the lover and the defender of this film, and we were just going to tag team hate all over it. But I guess I'll be the solo hater, which is it's a role I'm comfortable with, so it'll be just fine.
All right. So Mike, we've given you plenty to work with already. So
Yeah, fair enough, man. Okay, so basically my position is the opposite. I like it. For some of the same reasons you mentioned, like the fates being decided by people outside of their sphere and stuff, is kind of the theme of the film. A lot of people that like the book don't really like this movie because of all these vast differences, but I think that's just, it's kind of like a Shining situation where you can't really transfer it. But I really like this film because it talks a lot about how much of our liberty and our destiny are decided by the alliances we make and the organizations we commit ourselves to. So that being said, it makes total sense that a First Nations chief would decide the outcome at the end without them really having met him. I don't know. It makes total sense because it's like the whole movie, they're just being tossed around by different governmental agencies that go back on their word.
If I was writing this book, I would have the protagonist actually protag.
Oh, he does.
Where the he does to a certain extent. You're right. He does do certain things. He makes certain decisions, especially I'm thinking of saving the people from the war party in the beginning, the group of soldiers with the ladies. And then when he, knowing the consequences, still helps the group of guys escape the fort. But
and he walks into the Huron village like a badass.
Well, I mean, you don't have to agree with what happens to him. I mean, I think that's the point, is that it's not just. Is that a bunch of terrible stuff is happening, and it's not because he lacks merit, it's because two governments are fighting each other and enlisting the smaller governments of the natives that live in that area. Like, everybody is just allied to some organization, and they all have these like unions of power, and the destiny of a single man.
The fascist in Mike C is like loving, like just masturbating all over this movie.
No, this is the libertarian in me, because this is very much lamenting his lack of liberty. How the frontier is being like devoured and made into, a bureaucratic nightmare, or stomped over by all these wars. Like he says it at the end, right? If you want to jump to the end, like it's like the frontier will disappear, and there won't be any room for like a man that just wants to like hack out his existence out of the wilderness. You know, it'll all be part of the system. So this is like man against society, which is very libertarian. I think that is a lot of great themes in here to look at, right? Because like, how much
I
of
will
your life
grant you
is
that.
Hmm.
I will
Like,
grant you that there's definitely the frontier spirit of, at one point, what the girl is asking Daniel Day-Lewis why anybody would possibly live out here outside the protection of what the state or the
Yeah.
greater powers, and he's like, well, listen, they can't afford to live there, and out here at least they can get by on their own two hands and
And then
survive off the
she
land and
defends
that
it
sort of thing.
later to her father, right? You know, or she's yelling at Buddy who wants her. It's just like they hack out their lives out of the wilderness, bearing their children on their back. You know, and like the idea of not supporting that, like oppressing that, is just horrific because they're taking on all the responsibility of their lives to go homestead at the edge of the world, and they're still getting fisted by government.
Yeah, conscripted and not allowed to defend their own.
Well, and they
heart.
had a contract, right? They had a legitimate contract. You know, they had his word, and then when push came to shove, he said, "No, you're not allowed to leave. I need you to be here as troops." It's like, well, then why'd you even ask in the first place? Why didn't you just chain me up and bring me here?
Well, it's not like the first time that a government would have lied to somebody to get them to do something, Mike.
Yeah, they blew up those trade center towers or whatever too, right? Like, so I'm just kidding. I don't actually believe that.
No, but
You can edit that one out.
I could totally see them like just saying whatever needed to be said to get these guys to get
Yeah.
into the position they needed them to be in, and then later on, yeah, of course, not follow through on their contract
Yeah.
because what are you going to do? You know,
What are you gonna do? Not bail out the banks?
they are
That's just
in that area.
us.
All right, I
Without
feel like
government, who would kick people in the face?
we're derailing already here.
No, well, I don't know. I really do think this is a libertarian film, and I like it because I think the theme is like basically your life is defined by who you ally yourself to, your brothers and your community, you know, and what governments you end up having to submit to. You know, whether you're rebelling or helping them out, or you know, hacking out some sort of sovereignty for yourself. You know,
Right. I did like the angle of, you know, when that commitment was broken, then all those colonials were like, hey, if their laws, if their commitments aren't going to be met, then we are being oppressed by them. It's like
Yeah.
sort of dawning that realization, and they react to it. You know, they're like, well, fuck this, we're gonna get out of here, we're leaving.
Yeah. No, it's good.
And, yeah, I thought that was the appropriate response. And I don't know, there's a lot going on in this film. I mean, there's a bunch of layers, and Robert, you were saying it was like there were all these different stories, and it was a bit confusing. But I think if you step back and look at it, you know, they are kind of interweaving. You have all of these things happening, but they all sort of echo each other. You know, you've got these alliances, and you've got antagonism between these groups, and then you've got a journey of sort of self-discovery, especially with Madeleine Stowe character, who, by the way, she was really good looking in this film, by the way. But you know, she is this English daughter of a colonel living in London, coming out to the wilderness, and it doesn't take much for her to turn that corner and be like on the side of these people who are scratching their existence out of the earth, and to see that they are noble and that what they're doing is just, and that what her father and the British government is doing there is terrible.
And the French.
And the French.
And all of the native governments.
Yeah, I did want to talk about the French a little bit with the general who they bombard the fort and come to terms for surrender, and he's actually very cordial about it. He like lets him have almost any terms he wants as long as he hands over the fort. And I thought that was pretty telling. But in the director's commentary, Michael Mann was talking about how there's some truth to that because they only had so much time before winter would set in. This is Western New York. Back then, that was the frontier.
Yeah.
But you can't make war in the snow very well, as Napoleon and Hitler discovered. So the French had to seize that fort as quickly as possible and move on because they were basically losing daylight, right? They were losing the ability to make progress. And so that's why he gave those terms so acceptable to the British so that he could just move on to the next thing. So that in the film, it played out as he's being like overly nice and like very, there's like sort of a code of conduct, like the rules of war. And it seemed kind of almost refreshing to see something like that. But then it also makes like war itself so ridiculous because they're willing to talk so cordially to each other. Meanwhile, the cannon fodder people are just getting shot up and destroyed. And it's like,
the officers are treated like human beings, where the cannon fodder and the privates and the lower ranking enlisted men are just like garbage to be used.
Yeah, and conscripted and whatever, and
goodwill is good business, though, right? Is what I took from that. I mean, there's no point in being adversarial to your adversaries if you can make peace. It's beneficial for everybody, right? It's like, when you complain to a business and then they try to like run interference on you being satisfied by like not rescheduling or not giving you your money back or whatever, and you're like, well, I'm going to win this exchange for one, and secondly, I'm going to tell everybody I know now. Like you're
Yeah,
So-
I've found that most of the time, a business that doesn't have like a sort of protected racket will be focused on customer service. But if they have a geographic monopoly, like say a cable company or something, they're notorious shitty service.
Yeah.
Terrible. So, but the businesses that don't behave like that don't have a government backing them, go out of business, right? That don't, And yeah, you could throw the odd person out of your restaurant or whatever, right? Like sometimes it's got to be that way, but you can usually tell when a place isn't going to be in business long when they're dickheads to you. And that's the same as taking a fort, right? Like there's no point in trying to massacre these people if what you need is the fort and you need them to leave. And all it takes is not shaming them for them to be willing to do that. But yeah, it is like war is like sickeningly it's gross, the death and the way they treat infantry. But
Yeah. Now, do you guys think that the French general knew that he was going to be leading them off to this ambush by Magua? Or was that later sort of concocted after the surrender had already been agreed to?
well, they portray it as like an idea that he's convinced to by Magua, right? Like
Yeah,
he
'cause Magua
convinces.
Magua wants revenge.
Yeah, and I think he convinces. I mean, that's how they portray it. I'm not sure if I believe the likelihood of that. Maybe he was thinking that the whole time, but the French commander is like, yeah, you're probably right. You know what? Do your thing. I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Right, because the French guy is like, well, I can't break the truce, but I'm not saying you can't.
Yeah, so that's kind of, if he sleeps at night, I guess that's,
That is one of the things I did like about this movie a lot, is the humanization of Magua and his reasoning for being so single-mindedly wanting to murder the gray hair and his family. And
Yeah,
that,
Kaiser
I
Soze came
appreciated
out.
that.
Yeah, he's like, I'm gonna wipe out his seed. Like his genetic lineage is done.
Yeah, that's hate
Kaiser
speech now,
Soze-
isn't it? Bringing up the idea of hereditary
Not
genes
against a white man.
No, I think even acknowledging the biology that they were discussing would have got you banned from YouTube.
Would it though?
Yeah,
He's a Native American talking about killing a white man. I don't think it.
No.
he's a
I
protected
just
class.
mean like we're not supposed to talk about how like people have babies and those babies carry genes from their parents and that's like the driving.
Oh, so you're saying
the
he's
driving-
probably the great grandfather of Elizabeth Warren? Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
All right. So here's another tack I want to take on this, and this might be spicy, might be a little controversial, but one of the talking points about this is you've got native cultures, native peoples living in this land, and there's a variety of them. And you've got wave after wave of immigrants coming from Europe who go through some really terrible situations to get there, but they're coming there to seek a better life. Like they're going through fleeing Europe, terrible situations in Europe. They're going through indentured servitude, paying that debt off before they can then go scratch out existence out into the wilderness.
Mm-hmm.
But they are not coming for,
A
contract.
social welfare system.
Yeah, the present day situation,
More hate speech, man. You're looking to get banned off the internet.
I know, but that's what's fucked up, right? Because the Indians in this are essentially the open borders position. Maybe not willingly, but they're overpowered. They're not able to resist it successfully. I mean, maybe at the time, in 1757,
they had zero chance of beating Europe.
Do you think it was known at that time? I mean, the elder that gets introduced at the end and decides the fate of our hero sort of brings up that, hey, this has been a question ever since our white fathers came here.
Yeah.
On what are we as a people to do?
I think that if Europe wasn't fighting Europe in Canada and the Americas, then they would have completely subjugated the native population. Because they couldn't fight both wars, the French and the English, and for that matter, the Spanish, right? They couldn't fight those wars and the war against the indigenous people. So they had to ally with them. Because it's like guerrilla, it's asymmetrical warfare too, right? You have to deal with, like, England wants to fight France. They're dealing with the one set of tactics, and then you got to deal with guerrilla tactics as well. Couldn't do it.
Yeah, and it seems though, I mean, that was one of the big things with the Revolutionary War. The colonials did use guerrilla tactics against the British, who were very regimented in how they would fight. Wearing bright red, kick me here, target uniform.
Well, bureaucracies build empires, though, right? Like that's why the Romans were so powerful. It's bureaucracy and like systematic, because you can always just get more people if you treat them like pawns, right? Just throw them through the meat grinder. But if the rules of the system are maintained, then the empire grows regardless of how many people you murder.
Well, to a point. I mean, eventually you do.
Well, they collapse, right? Obviously, they all collapse, but but the successful,
Does this tie into your not liking the fighting in this so much, Robert, or was it just like how they portrayed it? Because to me, in watching it, you get a musket and it takes like a minute to reload it, so of course you just get the one shot.
Ranks, ready.
Well, unless you're the hero. I mean, this is a time in Hollywood when if you're shot by anybody else, you might be okay, but if you're shot by the hero, you're instantly dead. If you're even touched by the hero, you're instantly dead. He has a plot armor to the nth degree. He can run around the battlefield and nobody even tries to hit him. But it just reeks of. I mean, as I was watching the fights, I was just imagining how they would be done in today's time, and how like there's a scene where he's handcuffed and they're being ambushed by Magua and all these the Huron tribe, right? And he's handcuffed, and then there's just the next shot, he's taking off his handcuffs and he's just picking up a rifle. Well, in today's movie, I think they would add way more drama to that. They would have a scene where he's handcuffed to a guy and maybe the guard gets shot and dies, but then the key gets kicked off and he has to go chasing after this key as it's getting kicked around the battlefield. And maybe it'd be a little bit too ridiculous for this kind of movie, but at least it would have some kind of drama to the event. Maybe you could do it better than I'm just imagining it, whatever. but it just seemed like it was almost like Daniel Day-Lewis was this action hero, superstar, movie star guy, because the team of 3 guys was taking on an entire war party of the Hurons. And it just seemed like they had plot armor to the nth degree and could do no wrong until the plot needed them to die. It just reeked of old Hollywood, dumb Hollywood. But dumb Hollywood isn't necessarily terrible. They can do character and romance decently. Interpersonal conflicts, like those things were set up well in this film. People had ideological differences and arguments, legitimate grievances against each other. That's good, nice and refreshing. We don't always get that, but in some way Hollywood has progressed, and in some way they've regressed. Some ways they've gone for spectacle, and then they've forgotten character and story. So you could probably a remake of this movie would probably be worse than what it is.
Right,
but it
because
would have really good action scenes.
you get the spectacle that you're missing.
But you wouldn't care because you wouldn't get the character or the story, so you'd just be like, well, this is pretty, but who gives a shit?
Right, and if you had that, extra 10 minutes of him like trying to get the handcuffs off instead of just this magical, Houdini style, he's free all of a sudden. Yeah, they might add a little bit more drama to it, but by then the battle's over.
Yeah, probably, but at least it would humanize him as a character. Instead, he's like this Superman that is unstoppable, and that's just boring. It's like, somebody's in danger. Oh no, don't worry about Daniel Day-Lewis is on screen, so that's no problem. It just doesn't. It doesn't create tension for me.
Okay, well, just so you're aware, Daniel Day-Lewis, he is famous for becoming the character for the duration of the filming, even offset. Like, he was Hawkeye for like 10 months. And he went through survival training, and he actually got to the point where he could load a musket on the run in under a minute. And all of the action scenes and
that's awesome.
And all of the survivalist shit he was doing, like he picked that up in intense training in preparation for the role.
That sounds like Michael Mann's directing too, because like in Heat they all fired, and in Collateral they all did live ammunition training.
Yeah, the director's commentary was great. I mean, he has an encyclopedic knowledge of the events surrounding it, the historical things that are going on, but then also in the preparation for the role and why he shot things the way that he did. I will agree with you, Robert. The action sequences probably could have been done better. He does a lot of shaky camera and close-up kind of stuff that's just sort of like, all right, you guys move here, you guys do this. And it's not...
Well, and there's a lot of like, okay, this extra, do this move, and then pause while the hero kills you. Is dumb. Go ahead, sorry.
Could have been a little more fluid. They could have done some Wu Ping shit.
Yeah, I just disagree entirely with both of you. Like, it's just...
Bring it on, Michael.
Well, no, it's art, man. I can see reality out my window. I can see people doing real stuff. And then conversely, if you want sensationalism, watch, Avengers Endgame. I don't think there's any depth to that. It was a nice jerk-off session, but I don't know. I don't mind telling a story visually and having it be a little bit unrealistic, as long as the geography is coherent and you know what's going on, because it's not just a logical experience, it's also an emotional one. Like, it's okay for somebody to freeze and be killed on screen. Actually, that does happen in real life too, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever been petrified with fear, but it does happen.
Every time?
No, not every time. I'm just saying, like, yeah, maybe it's convenient that somebody does something this way, and then the consequence is that the hero succeeds. But that is just the idea of heroism. Like, this is what the Greeks called character. You know what I mean? It's like your destiny is the character. There's a fate. There's a fate to the events happening. They transpire, and you are, simply the right person to fulfill this role in this story. In that sense, I mean, I think that's the whole point of stories, is to give us good examples. So, I mean, whatever. You guys can lukewarm it or hate it all you want. Just
Well, just
you're not gonna ruin my fun.
I'm not saying I didn't like it. I'm just saying that I can see where Robert's coming from. That they probably had a certain set of tools to them at the time that there are better tools for actiony stuff today.
Yeah, I don't.
Certainly.
I mean,
I'm not saying it makes or breaks a movie. I could watch a terrible action scene in a great movie and still love the movie. I'm just saying that there was a lot of action scenes in this film, and they were all done quite poorly, and it took me out of the movie.
fair enough. If you think they were that bad, then that's fair. I mean, there's no accounting for taste, basically, in the end. If you
Sure. When it's that glaringly bad, I can't
No, I
suspend
didn't-
my disbelief. I think of a stuntman and the action star rehearsing that scene over and over again, and then they actually got it on film that time, and it's like,
yeah, fair enough.
okay, you're
I mean,
taking me out of the story, man.
It might be below the standard too, because if you look at like Collateral and Heat and shit, like the action's incredibly detailed. But like I said, I simply disagree with your opinion on the action. I actually liked it a fair bit. Even though, yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of cutaways and inserts where it's just kind of like I get cheesy, right? It's just cheesy, but I like the Warriors. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
pretty
you
much
like the
throw my
Warriors,
opinion in the
so there's no
garbage.
accounting for taste. It's okay.
Exactly.
So, Robert, what specifically stood out to you as like the most egregious? Was it when the cannon was firing on the French encampment, and the guys like sort of jumped sideways or whatever as the dolly shot was going by, or was it?
I mean, those. No, I mean those are all bad, but those, it's not over and over and over again. It was the hand-to-hand combat almost entirely. There's a lot of tomahawk and rifle butt use in this film, and I'm not saying that old Hollywood, this makes or breaks a film. It's not the biggest of deals. But when your entire movie requires you to do the similar type thing 50 times, because there's a whole lot of times where Daniel Day-Lewis is taking out one Huron guy and then another Huron guy and then another Huron guy, and it's all pretty much the same kind of combat, try and do your best to make it look good. Try and make it not distractingly bad is all I'm saying.
Well, I'm sure they tried their best, even if they failed.
Are you saying that you didn't like the continuity? Like he would do a shot to the belly and do a wraparound back before pulling out from the belly and then moving on to the next guy? Because that was a choreographed thing. Like he learned to do that sort of melee combat in the training and prep for the film.
You could probably maybe if George Lucas owned this film, he could go back and change some of the scenes. That'd be ideal.
See,
and then,
now
yeah.
we got Mike is thinking. Now
Yeah,
he's
you
thinking.
could use some of the scenes from that Assassin's Creed where it takes place during the Revolutionary War. Just use some of those.
Assassin's Creed 3. Perfect.
Add a few screams and make sure that Magua shoots first.
Mm-hmm.
Clunky.
All right, so not to belabor this point, but that's what I do. I will agree with you, Robert, to a point, but then also I think it kind of ruins a bit of the story at the end when we're up on this mountaintop and Uncas tries to save his girlfriend and Magua just kicks his ass, dispatches him almost right away. And then Russell Means just comes up there and is like, fuck you, Magua. And he does the same thing to Magua. Like Magua seems invincible, and then all of a sudden he is ineffective. So
you're agreeing with me? The main characters had plot armor and were an invincible machine of death.
No,
the plot needed them to not be.
That's horseshit.
And then they're super gonna die.
No, that's just a fight. Those two fights in a row is brilliant because it's like you go so low, you're like, holy crap, this guy's unstoppable, and then Buddy just rolls in, dodges the one hit, and immediately hits him. And I'm assuming that's what like actual melee combat is like. You don't get too many mistakes.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't buy.
It should last 30 seconds.
I just didn't buy Russell Means being like this badass hand-to-hand combatant, but
Well,
he
he
did
did-
just see his dad or his son get killed.
He
by
also
this.
survived as long as he did on the frontier.
So did
You know what I
all
mean?
of them.
Yeah. Just
All
saying.
those Huron guys, they're all survivors on the frontier.
Yeah,
They're all
we're,
trained killers.
So sometimes there's two masters. You
Dude,
know,
it felt like a Star Wars movie where Luke had a lightsaber and he's cutting through stormtroopers. That's what that's what Daniel Day-Lewis was, killing Hurons.
he's a hero. But I mean, there's cases in like Greek history or the Battle of Troy or whatever where two heroes would start fighting each other and everyone would just stop and watch. Like it was like this is this guy's could kill 20 people today and so could this guy's. So like let's just see who wins this. There's just a certain level of ability some people possess, and it probably comes from experience. I don't know.
So it's like watching Jordan. Like Jordan's on the court and everyone's just watching him.
Well, yeah, but we're watching actually a contemporary version would be Curry versus who's our guy? Is my guy Curry? No,
You got a guy?
Well, the Toronto.
You're Canadian. What are you talking about? Oh, the Raptors?
Yeah.
Why? He's no longer with the Raptors, by the way.
No, not Kawhi. No, our whole team was actually pretty good. Anyway, so you get these heroes that step up to the plate and they do battle or whatever. But again, this is a story. Like it's important to have heroes.
I understand it's a movie, Michael. This is what we do on the show. We watch movies.
It feels pretty
It's not a
nitpicky to be like,
documentary filmed in real time.
I don't know. Do you ever watch Hard Boiled?
Not in a long time.
Okay. The John Woo. It's spectacular. And it's like one guy mows down 100 people and they're all just basically there for him to kill and show his prestige and power. You know what I mean? Because that's just how storytelling works sometimes. Sometimes it's, it's about like a newspaper and it's really realistic. And this is, I would say that Last Mohicans is pretty realistic in a lot of ways.
What? You're not on board with Daniel's cheesy.
Well, it's cheesy too, and that's what I like.
I think
about
this is
Michael
like
Mann.
cheese melodrama. Is what I think.
This is what I like about Michael Mann, though, is that he painstakingly tries to create a very real and deep world, and then creates melodrama within that, which I find very interesting because I do like melodrama and characters being driven by the plot or by the circumstance and not the other way around. It's just interesting. But maybe that's what irks you so much about it. It's a completely different style of storytelling. And maybe as a libertarian, you're more about agency in a story, right?
I prefer agency in story. It's true.
That's fair.
Yeah. I'm not completely against the idea of a character battling against circumstance and these powerful groups. That can be compelling.
Well, what I mean though is that you say melodrama as an insult, like you say that as a criticism unto itself, and I'm like, yeah, it is melodramatic. You're right, but I have no issue with that. So if you're opposed to melodrama, then yeah, you're not gonna like this or
No.
You may like his other work.
I've enjoyed many melodramatic films.
Fair enough. But yeah, it's definitely melodrama. Like it's, oh, the world's on fire, isn't it? That's a sick line, man. That's a sick line. And he's like, yep, it totally is. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. And then they're like, do it. Do it.
Did they? Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I like how, and this is old school Hollywood, when you have sex with one chick and then it's like meant to be. They're soulmates now.
Well, we do have a tendency to bond. Especially women have like, kind of a endorphin reaction that helps them bond to the males. Not so much males, but I do feel like intimacy when I have sex with somebody and I do want to protect them and keep them around. So maybe not just the one, but certainly I feel a sense of obligation. And if
all these guys on the frontier, I mean, they are like alpha men. I mean, they had to survive all this hardship, so that made them tough. You know, they were honed in.
Yeah, this
fire.
whole alpha beta thing is like kind of irksome in, because like how else do you describe it? But like they're not, they're certainly like they have agency and they're accountable for their actions and have sort of self-actualized, I guess. But they're not like some jock, running around banging chicks and pounding 12 beers and, like in that sense.
No, but yeah, they've got themselves figured out, and they also know how difficult life is, and that they're almost lucky to have survived as long as they have, and how hard they've had to work.
Yeah.
And it also seemed as if, when he was willing to die for the seditious act, which I don't know if you guys have ever looked into what sedition is definitionally.
Not adhering to the central banking system.
Close. Actually, I had to look it up because you heard the word sedition used a lot during the impeachment process for Trump.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. I take it back. That actually is almost as entertaining as 2016.
But it's basically just speaking ill of the government. And it doesn't actually apply outside of the military, but because Trump is the head of the military or whatever, like the commander in chief,
God Emperor, I believe.
God Emperor, whatever.
He's going to retake Constantinople and make it.
It apparently applies to him. But when the British were speaking of it, they were like, "That's a seditious act. We're going to kill you as a result." I mean, that is like a death, like an immediate death threat. If you speak ill of the government, we will kill you.
Well, okay, so not failing to adhere to conscription is like an imprisonment, but on the battlefield, desertion is death, right? Because the penalty needs to escalate the closer you get to the negative thing that you're trying to force somebody to participate in. So you need to
Right.
if you want to keep people in line, you have to escalate the closer they get to wanting, like, to a situation that's going to make them rebel. So the term decimation, right, was I think it might have been Roman. Yeah, where you kill every 10th. You kill every 10th soldier, just execute them to realign morale to the state.
Help properly motivate the rest.
Yeah, motivate them back in line, right? So it's like any kind of mutiny, death. Yeah, you go against the system, you get, fuck around, find out, right?
So they're basically examples.
Yeah. You have to set an example if you want to oppress people. It's because like the entire system is based on fear, right? You need that Death Star to like blow up Alderaan, or else people will rebel.
All right. So, Mike, we are going to have to start winding down pretty soon here, but I wanted to ask, what was the motivation for this particular film to be selected? Because you and I, we converse through Messenger time to time, share some memes, links of new songs, etc.
Meme friends.
But you also mentioned a lot of films that you watch. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Do you want to do that one? Or do you want to change from, you've said you want to do Mohicans a few months ago. Do you still want to stick with it? And you said, yes, I still want to stick with it. So lay the question back to you. What made you want to stick to this one? And what point do you wish to convey in the final minutes here before we start to wind down?
Well, I think the themes of this film, what I like about it is that it talks about how a person's destiny is often dictated by the alliances we choose, what we submit to, the communities we form. And so, you make some bogus consumer choices. It doesn't really affect your destiny too much, but you ally to a state, you join the army, you make alliances between your neighbors, to defend your community. These things greatly affect the outcome of your life, I think, right? Especially in Frontierland. So I like the way this film addresses like a lot of these ideas in a melodramatic way. Like that it's kind of a very, very ancient storytelling where, and yeah, I mean, it's kind of lame. Some of the plot armor is ridiculous, and some of the some of the conveniences are, the contrivances are ridiculous, but for the most part, it's just the story of like a hero doing heroic things and trying to navigate all of the external pressures that exist because of these different unions of force in your life, right? So you form, you got the farmers come together and they're like, okay, we represent a small, union of force that we could defend this land against the British government because they're busy fighting the French. But it's, maybe it's also good to ally to, the British government because they did, stabilize this region for us, possibly. I mean, that was his argument, is that like they did see themselves as British citizens and they liked the rule set that government was providing. And then they found out later that that they should have done more research about, whether or not they follow their own rules, and it ended up being tyranny. So it's just like those kinds of choices completely dictate the outcome of your life. So that's why I like it. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
All right, and I also think that you're a Michael Mann fan.
Yeah.
So that plays a role. And Heat is another movie that I haven't seen in a long time, but I recall it being very long, but also very good. And Val Kilmer being pretty badass as
Perfect. Like you can't even make it.
Yeah, now there was the director's cut of this, and Robert and I, that's what we watched because that was the one that I was able to buy. But I had heard that the theatrical version actually has a Russell Means speech that is missing from the director's cut, and a lot of people who are aware and familiar with both say they really miss that speech. So, Mike, are you familiar with that speech? And what is
I think he said something about like the frontier doesn't belong to us, my people. It belongs to people like my white son with one foot in this like primal lifestyle and 1 foot in civilization. And eventually that won't even exist. Something to that end. That wasn't in the director's cut.
There's a bit of it at the very end, but then he speaks of himself as being the last of the Mohicans because, and it was. I thought that was almost a slight against Hawkeye, who is his but
he's adopted, and he's not. He's white. He's not brown. Like,
right, but
it's the end of his lineage. It is his son.
One of them.
Philosophically, it's his son, and he loves his white son. He said, but ultimately, his seed is not going to keep going. I think that was one of the central themes in the movie as well. It's like your children and finding a mate, and like he was the Mogwai's obsession with killing the lineage of Cora's dad. What's his name?
Monroe, Colonel
Monroe. Killing his lineage and telling him like your genes will not continue. So that addresses the biological imperative that drives 98% of our motivation. Wealth accumulation is all about finding a mate and providing for a mate and creating a safe environment to propagate yourself and copy yourself forward.
Yeah, I would imagine that these the people in 1750 willing to scratch their existence out in this wilderness were looking towards generational impact. Like
otherwise they would just otherwise they would just flip their house and not provide their children with a future. You know what I mean? They'd set up a social welfare system that can't be supported and sell their country off to other countries and create a bunch of government. Oh, I'm sorry. Just started thinking about the boomers suddenly.
All right. Well, that was a fine answer to the why you wanted to do this film. So let's get into some final summary and review, and we'll lead off with the hater thoughts from
shit
over there, and then we'll heat it up a little bit with me, probably liking a little bit more, and then we'll finish with you, Mike.
Okay, well, I don't have a lot of deep thoughts. I feel like Jack Handy over here. I'm glad we've got Michael C. He's always a very deep thinker, and he brings a lot of interesting ideas. I think he likes movies for good reasons. He always has good reasons for why he likes movies. Even if I hate the movie, he finds some reason to like it, which doesn't really occur to me. So, yeah, there are strong libertarian themes in this film, but the rest of the crap was so distracting that it almost didn't matter to me when it should. I should appreciate this film for its strong libertarian themes, but I guess it just annoyed me that this superhero character was just mowing his way through the movie. That I don't know. It just bugged me, I guess. I am a Man fan as well with you guys. I think we've done Collateral, and we could easily do Heat. Both are excellent films. I think Collateral is a little stronger, but maybe he learned a few things since he's gotten older. And I don't know how old he was when he did Mohicans, but he still obviously got some talent. He knows a little bit about story, but he was directing, or he's adapting a film, another film, and then also a book. And it very much feels like an adaptation to a book to me. It reminded me of like watching Lord of the Rings and knowing the book Lord of the Rings, because I'd read the book Lord of the Rings and going, oh, so they're not going to include that. Oh, they're not going to include that. Oh, it's jumping over to this scene now. Oh, okay, I see that's a kind of conglomeration of this and that and this character and this scene. It just felt like the story jumped around and the characters were conveniently in this area or that area, and the whole thing just kind of bugged me. It's the best I can put it. The film just bugs me. It's not great. It's not bad. It's just kind of unsettling. So I can't give it a positive review. I can't give it a negative review. I think if you're into historical movies, historical fictional movies like this, like A Dances with Wolves or Glory, or maybe a Postman. I don't know. I haven't seen Postman in a long time, so I don't know if that's any good or not. But we'll probably end up doing it at some point.
We will.
Maybe you'll enjoy that. Maybe you'll enjoy this. But I really didn't enjoy it too much. I watched it all the way through without much problems, but it's about as much as I could say. I'm glad Mike C is here to shower some love on it, because I really can't. I can give it a 5.0, and that's as hatery as it gets. It's an average film, especially considering its age. So that's actually high praise, because I could go negative. I could go really negative.
Well, maybe our conversation has brought it up a little bit. So if we had scored it earlier, you might have given it like a 4.
That'd be fun to do sometime. Yeah, give us the pre-score and then post-score kind of debate style, Oxford style debate.
Yeah,
that is an intriguing idea. So we open with a score and then we try to convince each other.
yeah.
Why?
Yeah, but treat it like a stock market or like a currency.
Yeah, I could argue the negative, and then Mike could argue the positive, and see how far we move. That'd be good. It'd be fun.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll put that on the burner of great ideas we probably won't do. Well, I'm going to say that I enjoyed this film probably more than you did. I mean, you can see I'm in this wonderful forest here. We're doing, of course, live streaming for our Patreon supporters at lastnighter.com/Patreon. You can see us. I've got a green screen. We've got video feeds and all that. And you can also view this on YouTube at our YouTube channel. So do check that out and get the subscribes going. We got to get over 100 on Last Nighters. Get that domain. So hook us up. A couple of subscribes. We'd appreciate it. So my review of the film is pretty positive. I think Michael Mann is a great director. I think maybe he had challenges with the practical effects that were available at the time with the fight scenes and all of this, but there was a lot of preparation that went into this. He shoots the scenes for specific purposes. They're there for a reason. And we find very strong messaging in this. There's a lot of interweaving things going on. And the antagonist, Magua, I mean, we see why he's motivated to do what he does in this film. So it's not like everything is black and white, cut and dry, oversimplified. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of complication going on in that. And I really appreciate a movie like that. It probably could have been a little bit less of an unstoppable Terminator style, but you also need to have this character make it to the end. Otherwise, you really don't have a film. So I don't know how they could really have done that differently. And maybe, like you were saying, Robert, maybe a little bit more tension with some harrowing escapes. But he did kind of submit himself to being hung for helping the other guys escape. So, I mean, that's a little bit of tension, a little bit of drama, and he does get out of that situation. So I'm not sure exactly what could be done differently, but I found it to be a very fun watch and beautifully shot. And I'm glad that it was recommended. I'm going to go with 7.5 on this, and we'll go to Mike.
Okay, yeah. No, you can have allergic reactions to films, I think. Shit can irk you, and you just don't like it. I mean, that's fair. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't got too much more to say about it, though. I think I've kind of covered the spectrum of why I like it. And yeah, I got a hard on for Michael Mann, but this is not maybe his best film. But yeah, I don't know, 7.5, 8, 8.5, 8. I guess would be the average between those two. I think it's great. I think that people can get a lot from it. And it's not a bad date movie. A lot of girls kind of like watching it with me, so it's like, well, not a lot, but you know what I mean.
Well, Daniel Day-Lewis had to get pretty hunky for this one. I guess he put on something like 20 or 30 pounds of muscle.
Yeah, I wouldn't throw him out of bed for eating crackers.
There was one quibble I had, and that was the opening scene where he's running through the forest, and he's got musket and shirt on, and then moments later, he's shirtless. He's been running this whole time, so I don't know where his shirt ended up.
Same place as Kirk's. James D. Kirk's shirt ends up.
Probably.
No, I get it. You're right. Like, I mean, there are some failings. It is a little bit cheesy, or maybe even a lot cheesy. But I like cheese, so.
Well, yeah, of course. So anyway, that's our show for tonight, everyone. You can support the show by giving us likes and subscribes on YouTube, and what else? iTunes podcast, Apple Podcasts, whatever they call that these days. You can also hit us up on the old Patreons, lastnighters.com/Patreon. You get pre-show content, almost an hour of it for this episode, and also post-show content, which we affectionately call Kathleen Turner Overdrive. And that's at lastnighters.com/Patreon. This is episode 114, where the show notes will be found at lastnighters.com/114. And you will find links to all of Mike's prior appearances and also his music at Mechanical Dream Revolution, which can be found on SoundCloud. You can also find links to Trubster.com, which is Robert's merch site. He's got his art plastered on things that you can give him fiat currency in exchange for. And you could be riding in style, walking around town wearing these T-shirts with his designs on them. I highly suggest checking out Trubster.com. That's 2 B's. Is that correct, Robert?
That's 2 B's for a double dose of the bubs.
Double dose of the bubs, TRUBBSTER. That will also be on the show notes page, of course. And we will be back. Just in case tonight's episode wasn't enough toxic masculinity for you, we're going to double up next week as we bring back the professional asshole to talk about the Mel Gibson flick, Edge of Darkness. So that one should be a lot of fun. Mike's already got some comment here.
Nothing. I just you could have done the Patriot, which is like basically this plus Roland Emmerich. Do you know what I mean? Like if Roland Emmerich made Last of the Mohicans, it'd be the Patriot. Mel, our guy, fucking Gibson, what a guy. Oh man,
he's a legend, man.
You can edit that out if you want. It's like, man, the guy just got no chill.
Well, we'll be back with that for next week. And I guess Robert has dropped momentarily, technical difficulties. He was hanging for a minute, unlike Jeffrey Epstein. But we'll be back next week with Darkness. Thank you, Mike. And we will see you guys all next week. Stay healthy, my friends. Good night from last night. All right, we can continue for just a couple more minutes on the Actual Anarchy podcast. We had a little train wreck at the end there. Robert dropped off. Mike was doing a little dance, making a little love. Get down tonight, as we were talking about Last of the Mohicans. So I always save like some controversial shit for the last portion here. So
Not
we're
me.
talking about well, yeah, you shot your wad in the pre-show, and then all
You brought up Hitler though, not me. So and Napoleon.
well, somebody had to. So I was talking about the open borders position, the contrast from 1757 to now, and how the Indians were basically their culture was pretty much decimated. To throw that word in there again, just for slightly different usage. But on the whole, this might be controversial, but I think it was perhaps a net positive in that Western culture was the one that won out.
It's like hate speech.
Wow.
Because what
you're never intersectional, Daniel.
Oh wow! Are you saying that one culture that dominates another can be theoretically a net gain since they were strong enough to dominate that culture? What are you, a fucking Nazi?
You are intersectionally ignorant and illiterate.
Let's not put too many words in the mouth there. I'm just saying that as it played out, we perhaps saw an improvement in standard of living for the common person as a result of Western civilization expanding.
Is this the Life of Brian argument where they're all sitting in the Colosseum? They're like, well, yeah, I hate the Romans, but the roads are nice. So
it's what have the Romans ever done for us? Well, they did build the aqueduct. Well, yeah, that's okay, and the roads, yeah, that's good. Okay. So civilization, in a nutshell, is one, property rights, and two, forcing any nomad to adhere to your concept of property rights. So all of the stuff that we have comes at the price of primitive ideas.
And now,
and
Mike,
even anthropology, they don't call it primitive anymore. That's like they've become very sensitive. But I mean,
I think we lost.
We
lost
started
a moment
planting
of what you were
seeds
saying.
and created agriculture. Huh? Oh, is it? Am I still on?
Your
Check.
slide showing it up for me. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you're getting stomped on. I think
Yep.
maybe the powers that be don't like what they're hearing.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what's funny is I was on the libertarian side. This is where I'm supposed to like stand up and be like, carry the banner and dominate nature and crush all other societies. But I'm just saying that objectively, we planted seeds and then we told everybody else that they're not allowed to use that land, and that's just what civilization is, right? Civilization stomps on nomadic cultures. That may be a benefit, that may not. All I'm saying is it is what it is. Like, yeah, I mean,
right. As soon as you
the
plant
aqueducts or whatever.
crops and put up
So, I
fences,
mean, I get
you
that,
are
but I'm
stopping
like-
the nomads.
Yeah. So, and it's like the Pentateuch, right? Like the first 5 books of the Bible are basically outlining that history of humanity. Or, in that crescent, fertile crescent, whatever. Yeah, like it's there. I don't know if it's morally superior, but it is. Like there's certainly a motivation in humanity to pave the whole world. So if we can find a balance with nature and try to like live in harmony with cultures that don't necessarily adhere to that, it's very difficult though to have a cohesion between like a nomadic system and a non-nomadic system. Property rights are an extension of civilization, So
Yeah, I think we're picking up.
We're kind of talking about hippies versus.
Yeah, I think we're
And I said, this usually it's my character to start getting all fucking fascist about conquering everything that's weak, right? But I don't agree. I'm just saying it may not be morally
time it was
correct, but it
Daniel.
is certainly. Yeah, Daniel. Hey man, who's the fascist here? No, if you want to defend your culture, it's nice to have roads when an army shows up, right?
Yeah,
It's
now
like you can
I
survive. Yeah,
I
you
do
can,
wanna-
you know.
I do want to defend it just a little bit in saying that I think that it could warrant a multi-hour discussion to get into the nuance of what I'm trying to convey. But we're at the end of our show, and Mike, your audio is chopping up really bad. You might need to drop and come back for the Kathleen Turner Overdrive. But we're going to need to say goodnight on the actual Anarchy podcast, and we can continue the conversation. If anyone wants to hear any of that stuff, you can become our Patreon supporter at anarchy.com/Patreon, and you can get pre-show and post-show content. And also give us likes, subscribes, all that good stuff. We've gotten really good reviews lately, so keep those coming in. And we will have the show notes on actualanarchy.com/171. And we will see you after these messages. Maximum freedom, everyone.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.